a club member. Okay. Kim has her own business, Snap Happy Photographer. And I see lots of good things on Facebook and on our CAPS page. And I think you're talking about products or food. Oh, great. You're going to make us all hungry. So Kim, come. You want to click that on there and then...
Oh my goodness, this is weird. I'm probably sitting. Hi, hello. Oh my goodness, is that what it's like when you have your photos taken with a flash? I'm actually going to be seated for this presentation because my notes are handwritten. And now I'm effectively blind. So while he's figuring out where my presentation has gone, I'm Kim Mortimer, and I've been a CAPS member since the fall of 2019. I had already met a majority of members thanks to the 2019 Canada Winter Games, and I think that was the result of me joining the club. So while Mark dances around,
it's coming.
I won't dance. I'm going to be seated so you can see without interruption. And I don't think I'm quite 30 minutes, Judy, so please pepper me with questions or whoever is going to field that, and that should stretch it out to about 30 minutes.
Slide only?
Yeah, slide only.
Well,
it already looks funny.
I know. It's not good time.
It's a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's the Apple version.
So do I have to use both the microphone and the handheld?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this will be really interesting, folks. Bear with me. I have lots of notes. Okay, so thanks, Judy, for the opportunity. Sorry, I have to mind my manners here.
So we can't hear you too well.
Oh, so the speaker's up. Well, that's very. You might have to.
So put this up a little higher.
This microphone louder.
How about the online audience? Can they hear us?
Yeah, they should be able to.
It's the handheld. That's not good. So you need this right at my mouth. Oh, it's me. So thanks, Judy, for the opportunity this evening. I confess I have never presented my work in this fashion, so I hope it doesn't come across too shaky. First off, I'm a lifestyle photographer. And if you Google that, you'll learn that I work to capture portraits of people in real life situations. It's actually a means of storytelling. So if there's somebody doing something, then it's a lifestyle opportunity in my mind anyway. Which brings me to food. Maybe not. So there it is. So if you think playing on your cell phone at the dinner table is rude, imagine having a friend bring her camera along to a restaurant. A number of my friends are actually involved with the food industry, and I've been fortunate to have had behind the scenes access and capturing them at work. It was only a natural progression for me to become more attentive to food photography. So tonight's presentation will feature how I've adapted food photography into my repertoire, starting with this cinnamon bun. So I'm just literally hitting this down. So we're all familiar with the cliche, fake it till you make it. Well, I won't get further than the first slide before you realize I'm the least technical person in my approach to photography. I stole this quote from Lee Norby's recent presentation to perhaps deflect any pending technical questions you may have already compiled in your head. What's in my bag? I have two of the same camera bodies, a 50 mil and 18 to 70 millimeter. That's actually broken and stuck at 18 millimeters. I have a 55 to 200, which is just a kit lens, and a speed light, which I don't even use. So I'm just kind of embellished there. So really for food photography, I'm using the 50. And what I haven't noted is the macro lens that I frequently rent from McBain. Woohoo! I knew Hank would say something anyway. My passion for photography really took off when I owned a BlackBerry. Everybody goes quiet. When I advanced to an iPhone, I actually began taking workshops at the West Edmonton Mall Apple store and food photography workshops led by a local blogger who actually at the time was also scheduled to present to this club. I've actually got her notes at home. It was early in 2018 that a friend of mine recognized just how much I was involved with cell phone photography and how little he was actually using his digital camera for the past decade. He literally gave me an entire camera kit that he'd been neglecting, and I've been snap happy ever since. There wasn't a manual, and I happily photographed my way through the year and into the next on auto until I was recruited as a volunteer for the Canada Winter Games. I had to enroll into back-to-back digital photography classes that were offered through the city of Red Deer, just to learn how to operate my camera manually and arrive somewhat prepared to photograph indoor sports. Flash forward to today, and I'm self-employed as the Snap Happy photographer, offering services to both businesses and families. So I've been a crazy camera lady ever since, and that very first year with a DSLR, I have obtained permission to return to a bakery where a food workshop was held for cell phone photography, and I hung out with the staff there for a day. This was probably where I started planting the seed that I'd chase food photography. I kind of finagled an invitation to shoot behind the scenes of chefs preparing for a long table event that's usually an annual event in Markerville. Again, exposed to food. And then the following year, I earned the invitation to come back and be the official photographer for the, I think it's called the Taste of Markerville. I stood up, or maybe I didn't stood up. I'm fairly tall, long armed. So that was literally, yeah. Again, this is when I was first figuring out DSLR stuff. So my goal with food photography is to make people hungry and inspire people to eat what I shoot. I'd really be excited if this actually compels you to go home and photograph your next snack. This photo was, again, I invited friends. They didn't know I was bringing my camera until they sat down, and I stood up to take this table shot. As much as possible, I actually try to recreate a dining experience for the viewer. This takes into consideration perspective and a little bit of trickery. Now, remember, I've already shared that I'm the least technical photographer. I'm deeply inspired by actually capturing what looks normal. I typically play in natural lighting, comfortable environments, and I have a no fuss attitude, which, as the slide says, the same goes for food photography. Real images, in my mind, don't require food handlers or stylists. Imperfections actually make the images, again, in my opinion, relatable and realistic. This is what I was photographing. Now it looks weird. This particular shoot was indoors at night, but the art direction for this project was intended to inspire viewers to think, hey, I can see myself sitting there eating this dish. So the white balance, yeah, it's off. Focal points, as you'll see in the next few images, and the addition of human elements all play into creating creating accessibility for the viewer. The charcuterie board in areas look blurry, so I have to admit the end users often ask for uncropped images, and they do that themselves. Most likely there is an overlay for their social media templates that would kind of probably cover up the salami pieces. Okay, these images aren't really read in real life. I'm going to just say this is kind of the transition of me editing on my computer. But if you look on my laptop in front of me, it looks good. It's not a red ball. This is not making me look good. This is incorporating a little bit of human element, just for interest's sake. Again, it's just as if you're sitting at the table. A couple of years ago, a new eatery reached out to me for photos because they were having challenges gaining social media attention. They had actually been taking their own cell phone photos and having the most difficulty with soups and stews. This series of images are intended just to show my thought process in composing an image. In all honesty, this eatery mainly serves takeout, so I was really limited to what I could work with in regards to backgrounds, textiles, props, or even dishes for that matter. The intention of the images is to make you feel that you're sitting there at their establishment having lunch. So to recreate what a diner might experience, if you were to look at the table you're seated at now, you're probably looking at the table at a 45-degree angle. So assuming that there's a bowl of soup there, that's the angle you're going to be looking at. They were shooting cell phone photos. They're not photographers. So it was just flat. To create some depth, I just lobbed my spoon in there and brought it up to the camera. Now, if you pay real close attention, it looks like somebody's feeding you soup rather than you eating soup. They didn't catch that. And the next one, just a little bit of context. As I was shooting image items, they weren't clearing them away from me. So technically I was pushing them to the back. But in this case, it served as a little bit more story, a little bit more context that you're actually indulging in a hearty meal at their establishment. This was a final image of a St. Patrick's Day meal that they were promoting. You may recognize this as one of my submissions, perhaps in one of our competitions. I wasn't graded that well on it, I don't think. And fortunately, I have since photographed the majority of their menu to date, which has provided them with website and social media content, as well as small printables. So they've actually used some of their images on gift cards and perhaps some of their, I think, catering menus. And if you go into the eatery, you'll probably see my images on some of their posters, I think. These images, probably 50. It could have been the macro. I really don't know by looking at them how I can tell without looking at the data. Wow, from this angle, this photo looks horrible. But if I have succeeded at placing you within this image, you're probably now mentally capable of reaching into this bowl of popcorn and taking a sampling. All photos to this point, as you've noticed, have been shot on location. This particular image was taken in my office/studio, which I think only one person online has seen since. And it's in front of a south-facing window. I've probably used 3 pieces of foam core to create background as well. And luckily, I was able to stage a series of these images simply by pulling items from my pantry, which I did not know I had on hand. It's like I have a bag of sprinkles for some reason. As a lifestyle photographer, I am completely drawn to photographing people, especially people doing something, as I've already shared. But if they're doing something with food, oh my gosh, my mind's blown. And for this sequence of images, I'm actually following the same composition set up in my mind, only now I'm including the humans. But I must apologize for the cropping. I'm actually dragging and dropping images into a template for this presentation. The image in the far right is really cropped, and it's leaving you with the impression that the donuts are not the subject of the image. But, boink, there's the full image. The idea for these images, these images are actually captured for a recipe book, and the author wanted to incorporate the theme of good friends, good times around food. And there's only one gentleman in that photo who doesn't look too thrilled. He wants the donuts. This was actually an action shot during a staged photo shoot. When I include people in food shots, I personally don't go after the hand to mouth eating shots. My food images are generally not for menu purposes, rather for social media content. And often I will know at the same time if there's going to be text applied to an image or a graphic. So sometimes I have to center an image, which, you know, some rules dictate don't put anything in the middle. So it helps working with a client to know if I need to adjust composition in order to satisfy their end use. In this case, I don't think they could get too much text around, but it's a general content image. Sometimes I like to imply that there is a human element simply by taking bites out of the food myself. This was shot at home, but I've actually shot other food that's been delivered to me, and sometimes the food just looks boring. If it's just a whole cheesecake, for example, I think it looks more fun if there's somebody who's gouged a forkful out of it. Having said that, I bet some of you are already wondering if I get to eat what I shoot. I'd be a lot heavier if I did. Sadly, the answer is mostly no, but that's for good reason. As a professional, my job is to photograph and deliver images. Food provided for these purposes are often a write-off as waste by the restaurant or the supplier. And what usually happens, a dish is whisked away as soon as it's photographed and replaced with another dish. So by the time I'm done, somebody's already gobbled up the goods. So what are some of the tips for photographing food that I've taken on and made use of? My style of photography might steer me towards some over others, but there is zero right or wrong options. Photography in my mind is art, and art is subjective. This image in particular highlights a drip. It's actually a fluke shot. The intended image, these cakes are fresh from the oven, and the intended image was to have a piece of honeycomb placed on top of it. Now, honeycomb is really sensitive to temperature, and this is the result. I was actually able to capture the image, but I just kind of saw the drip and went clickety click. Clearly, it was after the fact, and one of my influencers, as you learn who they are, says that drips create nostalgia for the viewer. However you'd like to analyze that. Ingredients. Sometimes I'm left to look at food as a landscape, and within that landscape, I challenge myself to find a focal point. You can still recognize this as being a pizza, but there's more interest when you focus on the onion ring. In fact, it was jumping out at me for attention. So crumbs. Crumbs happen when you eat or are serving food, and I'm all about keeping the crumbs, even the smeared fork. So here's an image that was shot. I had a perfect slice of cheesecake, and I was like, well, what would it look like if I started eating it? So I took a bite. I left the fork messy, the crumbs intact. Now, does this not look like you're sitting there eating the cheesecake yourself? Amazon, it's got a lot of cheesecake. This is not an Amazon shot. So it goes back to the diner's experience. If you're going to take a bite, there's going to be crumbs. I don't go out of my way to look for texture, but texture in my mind is a little bit more controlled with editing tools. If you can actually make choice about which foods to photograph, pick texture over smooth for visual interest. I actually photographed all 3 cheesecakes in this photo, but it was the raspberries that were way more photogenic. And yes, I probably enhanced the texture with editing. Here's a fancy word, specular. Specular highlights, in theory, it's a mirror reflection off a surface. It's not diffused. Wet food, fatty food, or smooth surfaced items will reflect light. In this example, the overhead lighting was bouncing off the icing. I just needed to position the camera, or myself holding the camera, to catch it correctly. This image has been used on I believe she uses it on her business card now. I've used a foil reflector to create these highlights, but I find it so much easier just to move around if possible and find it naturally. Back to lighting. Would you believe I'm just as picky about natural lighting as those are about their studio lighting setups? I can get creative with finding a normal light source if I have to, but lots of times heading outside is often overlooked, but a good option. My sweet spot though for lighting is beside a window, ideally on a windowsill. Sometimes I'll even put the food on the windowsill. There's probably a formula in my head I've developed through trial and error to determine time of day, weather conditions, which direction the window faces, that determines ideal conditions for a photo. But perfect isn't my style. I've become adaptable to shooting environmentally, which takes us back again to creating the diner's experience. What would they see if they were eating that sandwich in that venue? When restaurants were locked down during COVID and left to create patio seating and online ordering options, I was contacted to photograph some menu items for quick marketing purposes. This was November or December, and the days were really short. The staff on hand were cooking to order, so I would have freshly served items to photograph. But for some reason, I was left waiting around and daylight was disappearing with each item I had to photograph. The very last item was pizza with blueberries. Blueberries explode when they're cooked, so in the end, it was a dark item in low light. This isn't the pizza. I was literally climbing onto the backs of booths in the restaurant to get up into the windows. I was literally improvising. I was running around with a pizza. They were just kind of watching. So you're dying to know if it worked. Well, this is the uncropped final version. Now, people sitting here looking at this slide going, Kim, how are you being paid for anything? Because it looks horrible. It looks better on my laptop here. If you're going to photograph food, work with something that's absolutely delicious. It gets you excited. You hopefully get to eat it. And no matter what, somebody will react if you share it to social media. I hope I've inspired you to create food porn. Food is art. Food is a love language. Food is pandemic proof. For the love of food, try photographing it. These are mini cheesecakes, like one bite. So in case you're curious who's inspired me along the way, I've noted just a few names and Instagram accounts for these photographers. Jules Sherrod, West Coast, a photographer, a writer, a journalist, and actually an activist. He's a disabled photographer. Dennis Prescott. I just recently saw him on Netflix. I didn't really know he was a TV personality. He's also a photographer. And Tegan Gerard. I surf Instagram quite a bit, and every time I see her food, I have to Google the recipes, but she's also a photographer and a blogger. And because I'm a photographer, I also have 2 social media accounts. I'd love more followers. So on Instagram, I'm the Snap Happy Photographer. And on Facebook, I'm the Snap Happy Photographer. Thank you for letting me tempt your appetite. I take pictures of what? What's that?
You take pictures of food that you make yourself?
I was asked if I take pictures of the food I make. On Facebook, somebody found me and invited me to join a sandwich group somewhere in the States, and sandwich competitions were happening. So people were actually making sandwiches, taking crappy cell phone shots and putting them on the Facebook page. And at some point they did voting rounds about, hey, you know, which sandwich was better. And I thought, well, these people are doing crappy photos. What happens as a photographer? I don't know. So anyway, I created a hamburger. It took me days. I made this huge hamburger and photographed it. It looked horrible, but anyway, I submitted it, and I didn't even make it through the first round. So apparently it's all in the description of the ingredients. So that's the only time I've cooked photograph. Over the years, I've made something, and you know, I have to share my life on Facebook. So here's a photo, but it wasn't in the sense that I'm photographing food now.
So are you getting many clients, Kim, or do you go out and do you have certain clients now that you?
I do have clients. I've been wooing clients. I say wooing clients. Sometimes what happens, I've worked with a marketing agency, or in one case, I've been working with somebody who's doing content writing for their social media, and she wants to match it up with some imaging. Sometimes I have to share a portfolio so they determine if I'm suitable for the project that they want. So I do have repeat customers, and I have customers that I've approached and said, hey, can I photograph this? Or I've just bought food, photographed it, and tagged them, or said, hey, you know, thank you for. Sometimes I've gotten free food. I'm going to say I've had a pipeline of cheesecake for a while, and we worked on a collaboration where she promoted me, I promoted her, and it was happily ever after there.
Kim, do you ever doctor up the food with non-edible product to make it look better in your pictures?
Never. I was just asked if I style, handle, doctor up food. I do not. I might flick my finger to move a French fry to look a different angle, but no, I try to photograph what you see is what you get. I think I literally broke bread here, and I think, more focused on trying to catch the steam, which I didn't, but it's a heavily cropped image to fit this template. But this bun, that's what you saw. No editing. I don't think this one was. I've had to clean plates. Some people served me a nasty bowl of soup, and I was like, oh, come on, you wouldn't serve that to a customer. So yeah, sometimes you've had to wipe a plate. How do you know if there's messages? Just grab it.
Check the chat room.
And
We're
that's
going
what
there.
we're doing right now. Thanks, Lori.
I have your back.
Keep scrolling. Oh boy, how do you scroll here, Mark? Oh, got it. Are there any questions online? You might have to do that. You want to see? I don't need.
I guess not.
There's no questions. Okay. So if you do take any food, put it up on the group photos. I'd love to see what you guys do.
Isn't the president's coffee in the kitchen or something?
That's right.
So there you go. It's cats out of the bag. The president's choice is in the kitchen. So I'm timely getting you some advice. My advice, not rules, tips and tricks.
I do understand that I made fresh cinnamon buns.
Do it.
I don't know, I can fit here. I'll do fresh cinnamon buns. That was a mistake. It took forever. But they looked really good. So here I was with my cell phone taking pictures and angling. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I was like obsessed with taking pictures of these.
That's what happens.
cinnamon buns.
Yeah.
And anyways, I never made them again. They were good, but I was like, I could just go to the mall and buy a whole thing. But it was more fun actually. Yeah, it was more fun taking the photos than it was making them. But the best part was eating them. But yeah, I really did have more fun taking the photos. than-
I can obsess with food. It's
Yeah.
it's a little
Yeah, like-
a little dumb.
No.
My
Well, thank you, everybody, for following on my little food journey here. I know now we're moving over to airplanes. Okay. I have to You get to get all wired up.
That's about half an hour. Yeah.
I think we need to. Okay. I think we got that.
Yeah, it's that color is off.
So what did we see home today? Are you screen sharing something?
Oh, actually, we'll turn those notes off. There.
Screen sharing, I'm trying to get
Oh, okay.
presentation, but
Okay, so the
I
screen
use
sharing.
Microsoft Office at home, but that's all my own computer now.
That's good.
Slide on. Yeah.
Where you said-
Straight up, just under navigator. Oh,
So we still got the words on.
yeah.
Full screen?
There we go. There we go. That's okay.
All right.
I'm not too picky about. Do I? Oh,
Yes.
no. I can talk loud.
Okay, here we go.
Alrighty. This, yeah. Can you guys hear me okay like this? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I got the lapel mic, yeah. Yep. You betcha. All right, so thank you, Judy and Mark, for asking me to come up and do this here. I think we were talking in November-ish, October-ish about it. And that, so a little bit about me. My name's Kelly Tarala. Yes, it's more of a side business, Kelly Tarala Aviation Photography. I do have a regular full-time job still, unfortunately. Yeah, boo. And that's so a little bit about me. Grew up in northern Saskatchewan as a member of 38th Squadron Air Cadets up there. I aged out 1992. Yeah. And that at the rank of flight sergeant with the squadron, I was part of our gliding team's ground crew. So it was, very minor maintenance on the glider, retrieving cables and stuff like that. good old grunt work. I'm a member of the International Society of Aviation Photographers. It's mainly a group or a organization based out of the US. There are a few members of us in Canada. I think that's 10 of us in Canada. Majority of the memberships in the US. So a lot of the events they put on is across the border. So last couple of years to get down to those wasn't happening. I'm also a member of the Harvard Historical Aviation Society, just out at Penhold Springbrook area. They are currently restoring a Tiger Moth trainer aircraft, and they are also looking after crap. Can't remember the aircraft now. The Oxford bomber trainer they're working on restoring one. The Tiger Moth will be flight worthy in the next 3 or 4 years, I believe. It's they still have quite a bit of work to do to it. And besides work and drooling over aircraft, I do coach indoor and outdoor soccer. Yes, I know it doesn't look like it, but I don't have to do all the running. That kid. Next. So why did I get into aviation photography? This guy was part of it. This was my great uncle Don. Flew with the Royal Canadian Air Force, started off with 83 Squadron, was then transferred to 198 Squadron. Flew the Typhoon fighter ground air attack. The squadron code TP and the registration number R was the aircraft that he was flying. The serial number is different on this one. So they basically recycled the squadron coding in that. He was shot down, killed February 16th, 1945. I found his flight logbooks after my grandmother gave me his flight logbooks. It was her brother. Shortly before she died. Happened to be going through stuff because I went through a lull. I started off with wedding photography. Nope, not my thing. Tried doing family portraits. That didn't go over too well either. I did make a little swing at pinup because I do love the 1940s era. It was going okay. Still wasn't really enjoying it. So I took a couple of years off. I just didn't touch my camera for a couple of years. So it was just, okay, I've had enough for now. Let's stop. Came across his flight books. Started reading through it all. It's like, oh yeah, I remember looking at all these before. Then I started thinking back to my childhood, building model airplanes, hanging them from the ceiling, dreaming. Thought about my time in Air Cadets, and it's like, okay, you know what? Let's give this a shot, see what happens. So with that, I decided to start venturing out here in Red Deer. Spent a little bit of time out at Red Deer Airport, started getting my name kind of in with the board of directors out there, and that which has been starting to go well. And I've also been kind of communicating with some of the other businesses out there, just saying, hey, I'm here, I'm local. And that's so if they're looking for anything like that. Okay. Some of the gear that I use, so I run 7D Mark II. I will use that one for basically any of my ground air work that I do. My 5D Mark II, she's old. With her, it's basically any static display that I do. So any aircraft that's parked on the ground or any of the pilot portraits, which I just started doing last year. I will use my 150 to 500. Not a lot, it's heavy. I'll pull it out every once in a while, but I've been kind of moving towards, which I do have it on here, my 70 to 200 Sport, which I picked up, that was last year, Hank, I think. Last year before. And that one I've been loving. That lens, it's been very kind to me. My 24 to 105, the kit lens that came with my 5D too. I'll use it for some of the statics, but mostly with my pilot portraits. I run a couple Strobe Pro 600 studio flashes. A lot of times I'm out in the middle, wide open, and you'll see a couple of the photos here a little bit later on. It's harsh sun, so I need something a lot more powerful than than my 580EX to overpower that sun. I do keep scanner with me because it is kind of fun to listen and see what's happening. Flight radar app. Red Deer, the aircraft use it, or how do you explain this? They use it, but sometimes a lot of the aircraft leaving Red Deer Airport will not show up on the app. So a lot of times it's a guessing game when I head out there. I could see a couple planes on around Red Deer. Head out to the airport, nothing's flying. Other times there'll be nothing there and I'll just take a shot and just head out and say, and next thing you know, the flight schools are just going crazy. Touch and goes, touch and goes. And OpenADSB is another radar app that I use. A lot of the aircraft are switching over to this new radar technology. I'm still trying to understand it myself. Safety. I know with food side, you got hot ovens, hot food, whatever. Stuff like that. Other genres, you know, weddings can get pretty dangerous. Yeah. For me, I think part of it just comes from working the oil patch since the late 90s. I kind of put safety into the back of my head while I'm out there. If I'm on the hot ramp, so I'm actually able to get onto the ramp on the other side of the terminal, on the taxi, we're not on the taxiways, but by the taxiways, I will have my vest on. This was in Panoka. They were doing an event. Two brothers formed Yellow Thunder. They were doing an aerobatic class for pilots that wanted to start learning how to do aerobatics. They invited me to come out and spend the day with them. I was the only one on the hot ramp with a vest on. But having said that, I was allowed to just go right up to the runway. Rules are totally different. I love small town airports because I can go pretty well where I couldn't with Red Deer. I will wear steel toe boots on the hot ramp. There's stuff laying, well, not a lot of stuff laying around, but you got heavy equipment. The aircraft aren't exactly light. Sunglasses, it's bright. And a hat, being follically challenged. Yeah.
That's a nice hat you're wearing.
I don't need that sexy tan line from a ball cap. So maybe later in the season I'll wear a hat, but for the most part, I won't. And sunscreen I will put on because she's a little tender up top. And it hurts, yes. Okay. So the thing I like about aviation photography is I can do a lot of my own planning. Weddings, I honestly, and I'm always knocking weddings and I'm sorry for the wedding photographers. I can't plan. With aviation, I can plan my day. It's like, okay, we're doing this today, perfect. Weddings I found and family portraits, it was just all of a sudden, oh, let's do this. Oh no, now we're over here. It's like a squirrel trying to find nuts. And it just, my mind couldn't grasp that. With the aviation side and with some of the pinup work that I did, I loved it because I could sit there for a day and just, okay, we're gonna do this. And then as long as this goes well, we can move here, then here, then here, then here. Everything's set out, planned. With my aviation stuff, no different. I'll check the weather for that day because if it's windier than hell, not much is going to be flying out of Red Deer. The little guys will not fly if that windsock is straight out. If they do, probably a more experienced pilot, used to it. The flight schools, not so much. I'll take a look at the NOTAMs, the notice to airmen. So if I'm going out to a different airport, say down Drumheller, Lacombe, out to Rocky, there might be something going on at that airport where there'll be no flights coming in and out of there. Could be runway maintenance. I know Rocky has the aerobatic competitions going on once a year. So they'll put out a notice to airmen that within a certain distance, you can't fly around the airport. And if it's a new airport that I'm going to, I'll Google map it, see where I can safely park. And parking, right now at Red Deer, it's on the side of a gravel road, which is great because traffic's always flying by. The nice thing is they are building a viewing area on the south end of the airport, which actually comes in quite a bit. I was just out there the other day, and that looks like it's going to go in quite a bit. So with settings, it's going to be different. Depending what type of aircraft you're shooting, will depend on what you're going to be shooting with. Propeller-driven aircraft, I'm usually shooting in shutter priority. You want to try and get a nice little prop blur going. This you can kind of see a bit. Sun wasn't hitting the prop right, so it's not going to show as much as if we had a head-on shot. Unfortunately, not every propeller-driven aircraft is jumping all over the place. This one, I believe, was around 1/100th of a second, give or take. And that we're a helicopter. I've shot at 1/100th, and you can just barely see the rotation in the main rotor. And that, so it's going to jump around a lot. With propeller driven, I have gone as low as a 60th of a second handheld. I think I had 2 out of 10 for keepers on that one. And that, so it's, and being it's the start of the new season, it's going to be a little rusty for the next month. Jet driven aircraft, those are nice. The sound of a propeller, I like that a little bit better. But the jet driven aircraft, because they're flying at such a fast speed and because there's no moving parts on the outside of the aircraft, I shoot an aperture priority, set it, let the camera worry about the shutter speed. And that way, guarantee, most of the time you should get a fairly sharp shot, depending on where you're shooting at. With aviation photography, and just like with any other genre, trying to tell a story, trying to make something out of steel and wood look sexy, for lack of better words. Food photography, I imagine, is the same challenges. So clouds really help tell a story. I love it when it's cloudy out. This was out in Killam at the Iron Creek Flying Club. They had me out for the evening to do pilot portraits for them. End of the day, I just happened to look, we're just wrapping up the last pilot, just happened to look off to the west, saw the God beams happening, took a quick shot. Would I have composed it differently? Yeah, but it was a quick shot. Fuel tank, wasn't too happy when I got home and I saw the fuel tank in the background. But this was an interesting day because it was hot. I think it was 35 degrees, even early evening. And we were watching the storm clouds come in and it's like, okay, when are we going to end this? And then we just see them go around us and it's like, oh, a little bit of rain would have been nice just to kind of cool things off a bit. But with this, it actually turned out pretty good for me. Okay. For editing, basically upload through Photo Mechanic. I'll use Camera Raw and Photoshop just for some fine tuning. A lot of the editing I can get done in Camera Raw pretty quick. Photoshop, if I need to take out a power line or something like that, I'll go in and take that out. Or if I would have been really ambitious, I probably could have taken that fuel tank out on the last photo. But that was just too much. So ground to air work. This is a majority of the stuff that I'll do out at Red Deer Airport for now. Air shows and that. Clouds once again, and you'll see as we go through. Clouds, I love my clouds. I know I have images in here that don't have clouds and it drives me crazy, but a lot of times some of it were from air shows. So you're pretty well at the mercy of the day. Okay. The mighty A-10, it's in the top 5 of my fighter aircraft favorites. She's ugly, but she's beautiful. This was during the commemoration pass at the Alberta or the International Air Show up at Villeneuve just this past summer. He's probably traveling around 500-600 kilometers an hour at about 500 feet above the airport. And at the commemoration pass, they usually do for, well, in the US, they'll do it for fallen airmen, fallen soldiers for previous, like throughout the years. And that's so they still did it here with this because I'd seen YouTube videos on this demonstration team in the US and seeing all the pyrotechnics that they were doing down in the US. And it's like, oh, sweet, this is going to be great. Pyrotechnics going off on his bomb and cannon strafing runs. He did them, but there was no pyrotechnics. So it's kind of, you see him come in, see him pull the nose up for a simulated bomb drop, and he flew off. And I was sitting there, it's like, well, where's the explosions? No pyrotechnics. Disappointed. But clouds. Clouds. I have another image of this. Sorry. Oh, okay. I do have another image of this, which was taken just off to the right as he's coming around. Bald sky, not the same. This F-18 demo from the 2018 Whitecourt Air Show. No clouds. This was another hot day. I was actually fighting forest fire smoke on this one. There was a lot of dehazing and post editing to get rid of the forest fire smoke. Only way that I could make it look like it was actually flying instead of hanging there. Got some vapor trail, which I was not expecting out at Whitecourt, and a little bit of afterburner thrust. But and my clouds again. Harvard Mark IV. That's actually the 2 brothers that own both the planes. The older, I think Drew's the older brother. He wanted to take his other brother's Mark IV for a flight. So it was kind of funny watching them argue on the ramp on who was going to be flying it. It was down to, 1/25th of a second. So we got the clouds telling a story of us kind of a stormy, well, not actually it was kind of a weird day. Background blur. So I had slow enough shutter speed that we could get the background blur just to get show some speed in there as well. These guys were a treat. You know, you see the line around. Here we have 2 US Navy, they're EA-18s. So these 2 aircraft are used strictly for electronics warfare. So basically they'll fly in, they'll knock out communication centers, radar signals. It was actually really cool watching these two pilots. That's why I like the zoom lenses. They're not as close as you think. They're probably about, well, in retrospect, they're a lot further apart. I love the compression because then you can make it look like they're literally right on top of each other. And You got your radio operator on the back of the top and just kind of hanging out, checking things out. It's not like he has a lot to do during an air show, just except sit back and enjoy the ride. Okay. Then the two brothers, Yellow Thunder, based out of Panoka. These two are super nice guys. I've spent a little bit of time with them. Well, I spent the day with them 2 summers ago out of Panoka. Met up with them at the Alberta Air Show last year. And that the Harvard Mark II, which is up top, the Harvard Mark IV on the bottom. Only way I can tell these two apart is I'll look at the canopy. The newer Harvards have less supports in the canopy. It's the only way I can tell those two apart. Last year's air show was really, really strange for weather. We had the F-18s or the EA-18s and the A-10 flying around, basically a little bit of cloud, not really. As soon as these guys went airborne and the CF-18 demo plane went airborne, clouds started rolling in. So it was a little tricky trying to get these guys going because everything kept changing so fast with the lighting. It was made some challenges, but still made her. Birds, these guys are fun to watch and they can be a little tricky to photograph. They're 4-way cross. It was a Hail Mary. I've seen these guys numerous times over the years. 28 was my first time trying to photograph them. 4-way cross is, I don't know how they manage not to clip things because I know they are a lot closer than they should be. And that, but this one I actually used the 150 to 500 on. Thought I'd try something different. Okay. So this Pitts Meadows special, Brent Handy is a pilot of this plane. He's Saskatchewan based. He's an ex-snowbird pilot, ex-Royal Canadian Air Force pilot. Discharged, started his own aerobatic deal. The way these guys make these little planes do the things that it's quite amazing to watch. I'd shown Brent this photo about a year after this air show, and he actually ended up taking a copy of it because he said no one's ever taken a shot of the belly of his plane. It's always been with him canopy wise, so he was quite happy to see a different angle of it. General aviation, basically most of the stuff that I do. This guy had just taken off from Red Deer Airport. What I liked about this was, and I didn't notice it until after in editing, pilot was sitting there looking down at me as he was flying by. So I was quite happy to see that because then there's a connection between the viewer and the pilot of the photo. Propeller, so at least it looks like he's flying. He's not just sitting there looking like he's hanging around. And unfortunately, not enough cloud. And this one, Hank's seen this one. This one I just threw in last night. This was at one, the source was out doing some training runs. Chief flight instructor saw this photo and messaged me, asked if he could get a digital copy of it because he said he was in this helicopter. So I went, McBain printed it off for me. He asked for digital. I thought I'd just do him one up and actually give him a physical print. Kind of get my foot in the door with them. Rick, the chief flight instructor, super nice guy, took me for a tour of his of the hangar there. And he was explaining as they're coming in that they're basically simulating an emergency with the helicopter. So as soon as he came into a certain point, he just kind of reached over and threw the throttle right off just to get the pilot's reaction as he's coming in. And so he goes, that's why there was such a pitch when he was coming in. Because I said, I started playing around with it 'cause they were doing it quite a few times. So I'd play with the camera angle. At one point I had the horizon basically on a 45-degree angle. So it looked like he was coming in like this. Nah, but got to the point, it was the same maneuver for minutes and I had to try something different. So static displays. These usually get your foot in the door with the pilots. Once again, clouds tell a story. So it's Harvard Mark IV, stormy skies, converted it over to black and white because in my head, the story was World War II, the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, say out of Penhold. Stormy prairie skies, sitting on the ramp waiting to go. This 1966 Challenger this was just out at Innisfail. The Innisfail Flying Club had me out to do their pilot portraits. End of the day, this was the last pilot. The pilot for this aircraft was the last one that I shot for that day. Still sitting on the ramp once again. I've learned. Don't put your camera away until everyone's gone and the equipment's gone. Finished talking with the pilots, turned around, saw the sunset. And end of the day. Sorry? Yeah, it was. Yeah, it turned out really, I was quite happy with that one. Like I mentioned, you always want to tell a story. So this was Whitecourt again. The Captain Evans was just getting prepped for their show. The CF-18 demo pilot is in the passenger seat. But it's a quick story of the routine that snowbirds go while they're getting ready for a show. Ground crew waiting for his orders from the pilot on even though they know what they're doing, but they still go through the show of waiting. The CT-155 Hawk out of Moose Jaw. This was up in Red Deer during the Wings and Wheels event that they put on. Once again, my clouds. Gotta like my clouds. So the black and white photo that I had of the Harvard, this is the ash shot of it. Gives it a different perspective. Still have the stormy skies. That is a fairly old hangar that's sitting right in front of it. Telling a story from both sides. And this was the same one with the God's Light. Yeah, working around the planes, it's you have to be careful, especially when I have the studio lights out. Not my little flash, but the actual studio lights. I do have to keep them back a distance because if that goes over into that aircraft, yeah, it's not going to be a good day for anybody, especially my pocketbook when you have to pay for the damages. And that this plane actually belongs to a buddy of mine. He flies out of Innisfail. His little Cessna has been dubbed as the spam can. No idea. Everyone just started calling it spam can. And stars. My wife actually was shaking her head at me with this one. We were sitting there, it was the end of May last year. End of May, end of June. And my buddy Rob, who owns leaving his hangar at Innisfail to go home, texted me. It's like, hey, Stars is at the airport. You should get down here and get some photos. It's like, oh shit, really? Oops. I couldn't do it. got through 3/4 of it. Got up, grabbed my gear, just as I'm walking out the door. My wife goes, "Where are you going?" It's like, "Oh, yeah. Stars is at the airport. I'm going to see if I can catch them before they leave." Of course, I live on the very east side of Red Deer. Innisfail is a good 20-minute, half-hour drive. Got down there. They gave me the code for the flight club hangar office building. Walked through, walked out, or the caretaker of the airport saw me, we waved. And when I walked up, she's like this. Rotors are strapped down for the night. And it's like, oh, well, they're not going anywhere. I guess I didn't really have to rush out too fast, but I didn't know at the time. He didn't say anything at the time. I didn't ask, but I like this one because it's almost like waiting on a mission sort of deal. No, and to get up close to these guys, rare. No security around it, so it's like, okay, I got free reign. So the pilot portraits is a little project that I started last year. I started thinking these guys spend thousands upon thousands of dollars to get their pilot's license, and the aircraft are not cheap because even used ones are selling for like $150,000 for, you know, a little like this and that. So I try, once again, try and get a story. So this is Alvy Hand. He was the founder of the Innisfail Flying Club. He unfortunately just passed away this last September. We did this in June. He's 90, 91 or 92. He stopped flying when he was about 80. This is his aircraft. His son and daughter wanted to get a picture done of him with the aircraft. And then we thought, oh, perfect backdrop since he founded it. Let's put him in front of the Flying Club's hangar. Perfect. Got a few shots off of him. And it, once again, it was screaming hot last June, yeah. So to get him done quick and out so he could get cooled off. And that's, yeah, the family was quite happy after that we were able to get some photos of him with the aircraft. Ooh, yeah, that color really is off on the monitor or on the, it's almost like he's sunburnt. This is Rob, my buddy Rob, with the spam can. He was my first test subject, I guess, for pilot portraits. We'd been chatting for a while and then we just decided, okay, let's try this out and see what happens. We did it, and it fell flat. Rest of the members of the Flying Club saw it, wanted to get involved as well. So we did a date in June of last year, and then Iron Creek out at Killam caught on as well. Don Hand, Alvy's son. This aircraft, it does have a story behind it. It's a bird dog from Vietnam. This one actually served in the Vietnam War as a bird dog before the Canadians bought her over, but he kept it in the Canadian markings and that, so yeah. And if there's kids, I'll get the family involved. It's Doug Linseth, he's the president of the Iron Creek Flying Club in Killam. His kids were around that entire evening, so he wanted to at least get a photo of, show that the aviation community is kind of a family affair sort of deal. And it is the closeness between them, everyone in a flying. This was, did a memorial photo for the pilot in the picture. The lady, I can't remember, her husband died. Ironically, her husband died in an aircraft crash the year prior. This was his aircraft. They were getting ready to sell it, but she wanted an aircraft with his picture and the family with the aircraft as a memorial. And this one, I know I was able to watch the presentation after because I could hear it's like I could hear it. Yeah, I was on night shift when all that was going on. So this it was just something about him that I loved. He was almost like had a Sam Elliott drawl to his voice, but he was kind of goofy at the same time. So it was portray him as kind of a rough and tough pilot, even kind of like a cowboy sort of deal. Things I would change with there would be prop. I submitted it, wasn't even looking at that. And I probably would have lit the side of the aircraft a little bit. Yeah, the sun was behind the clouds at that point. Like it's right at the top, right? So we still had about an hour before full on sunset. And then I had to darken it to take the wash off of the back of the cowling. And I think this is the last one. So Doug's son, we had just finished probably about 4 or 5 pilots, and his son came scooting along on his little, oh, it's that movie. That's it. Thank you. I knew the movie. And he was asking when it was going to be his turn to get his picture done as a pilot. I just looked at him. It's like, let's do it right now. And that's what we set up. And then his sister got involved with it too. But yeah, he was quite happy to be getting involved with something like this. Yeah, but no, like this, yeah, I know this is the last photo. It's fun. It's great meeting the pilots. A lot of them are really nice guys. A lot of them are a little leery about you at first until you can show them what you can do. And they are a very tight-knit community. Breaking in, I would have to thank my buddy Rob for helping me break into it with the Innisfail Flying Club, because that has opened doors with a couple of other flying clubs around. And that's so it's a slow start. Slowly starting to break in with the Red Deer Airport, and that they just had me out. They hired me to come and spend a couple hours with them, just redoing some stuff for them around the terminal and that, for all the big changes that are coming up out there, which I know I'm quite excited about. And that's, so we'll see what transpires there. But no, it's fun. The balloons, I remember, was that last year you guys were out to the balloon races? Yeah, I was mad because I was working that day. I saw that afterwards and it's just like, oh, damn. Yeah. No, but no, thank you very much for having me out. It was great. And that, thank you. And that, if there's any questions.
So when you're doing the air shows and stuff, I imagine you
go to the only time I think I've used a tripod in the last couple of years would have been for the one sunset shot of that Challenger that the green one. I just thought, for the hell of it, majority of the time, even if I'm just out at the airport on the side of the road, it's all handheld. Air shows, for the amount of people that are at an air show, that's just a tripping hazard for anybody. Plus it's extra weight that you have to carry around. That's the biggest thing.
switch to mirrorless.
Yeah. Actually, I have been talking to Hank. I have been talking to Hank. And that, but yeah, no, with the weight and that, especially out at an air show, you're on basically pavement, usually about 25 degrees, and the sun's beating down on you. Any extra weight that you have, get it. Still working on that opportunity. the nice thing with the ground to air is you can still make it look like you were up with them. With the A10 and the two EA18 myself so that I could make it look like I was up with them, even though I was 500 feet below them on the ground and that. But I have been in talks with Skywings about it. They have expressed some interest, but with COVID and all that, everything's just been thrown off. Sorry? No. I was stupid when I was young. Yeah. Air cadets, free pilot's license. Did I take advantage of it? No. Or the opportunity to get a pilot's license. Let me rephrase that. So yeah, no, it's, would I like to? Yeah. Innisfail, yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I've spent a little time with the gliding club out at Innisfail.
Well, thanks both you guys for presenting tonight. That was great. It's great when we can get our own club members because we've got so many great members in our club that have done a lot that it's great to showcase our own talent too. There's a lot of it around here. So great. Thanks again, everybody. And that'll end the Zoom for tonight. And I'll post it as soon as I can, except for the stuff I forgot to hit record for. Sorry.